She's like, I think he could just try to get used to it. I'm honestly blown away by this. If I were her husband, I would also refuse to go over there if I felt like she's not on my side at all and she's not even willing to try and have a conversation and to deal with it. And she doesn't even see that as a reasonable response, then I would also be extremely angry. Welcome to Mom Alternative, where we discuss motherhood, parenting, and relationships. Today's all about love and what love actually looks like in observable behaviors in a relationship or a family. We'll be covering, do mothers-in-law love their grandchildren as much as they say they do? Is it ungrateful to expect to spend time with your husband? And what to do if your husband refuses to spend time with your family? Our first one is titled, Do you believe your mother-in-law loves your baby as much as she says? I just don't buy it. First time she met my son, she literally acted obsessed. You would think it was her child. She acted way more in love than me. She wouldn't stop talking to him for 5 hours while he was sleeping. She complained that she didn't get to hold him enough. I disagree. She held him for at least an hour each time she came over. That's a long time for a 2-week-old. My mum doesn't act overly in love. She's very toned down. I can see that her love for my son is slowly growing at a steady pace. This feels more real to me. So do you believe that some grandmas actually are in love and obsessed from the moment they see their grandchild, or are they putting on a show? Because I felt like I was watching a very dramatic performance. I wanted to yell at her to calm the hell down. Now, I actually think that there's something really sad about this thread. I think that there's a fundamental misunderstanding here in terms of how different people portray their love, how different, like the levels of excitement that different people experience when it comes to kids and how that comes out, right? Like how they express their emotions. And I get that there's this point where you kind of get annoyed. I also feel like people generally get a lot more touchy about this type of thing because of the idea of the overbearing mother-in-law. And so it's not so much about having problems with other people in your life expressing an interest or being excited to see your kid, but it's specifically related, it's targeted at the mother-in-law, that specific person who just annoys you because she has a hard time understanding boundaries. Now, there's nothing actually in this thread that implies that is this mother-in-law. So my impression is that she's just angry. And this level of anger seems like such a shame to me because there are two things that women should, I hope, see in some way when they have this type of situation. Number one, it's actually amazing. It's kind of a luxury and a privilege to have people in your life who are interested in spending time with your child, who want to engage with them, who want to interact with them. If you understand that the way, we don't have so many multi-generational households around anymore. And if you understand that the separation that has happened where a nuclear family will, previously used to have 2 sets of grandparents and maybe also had uncles, great aunts, as well as great grandparents, like all of these people were in the same kind of location. And if you understand how that connection is broken down as more people moved into cities, people move away from the parents at a much younger age, and so on, then you should have some appreciation for still having grandparents involved in your life who want to hang out and spend time with your child. And that is a privilege because as a mother, especially as a young mother, having people around who care enough about spending time with your child that you can, take a breath, that you can have a break, that you don't need to spend 100% of your time looking after your child, that you don't feel so unsupported in that experience is awesome, is amazing, is not a thing that a lot of people have access to. So there's that aspect of how it impacts you. And then the other aspect is how it impacts your child. Is it not amazing for your child to be surrounded by other adults who care about them, who spend time with them, who maybe share their interests with them, and to have this feeling of being surrounded by love and accepted by a community is also amazing, right? So there's a lot of positive in having a mother-in-law who really, really loves your child and who really wants to spend time with him. And then there is this aspect to it where it just, the impression that I get from this mother here is she's just angry at how she expresses herself. And that seems so sad. That seems so depressing. There was not a point in this thread where she made the argument that the mother-in-law is overbearing. She's trying to push you out. She's trying to usurp your role as the mother in some kind of way. She's not doing any of that. She's just hung out with the kid. She spent a while talking to him while he was asleep, so it means she wasn't even disturbing him. He, managed to sleep, and then she held him for an hour. And none of these seem like fundamentally irritating or annoying things to me. So I don't actually understand how she got to this point where she's pissed off enough by it that she would write this thread and phrase it in this kind of way that I think is really sad and really heartbreaking. This idea that she's lying, she's pretending, it's a performance that she's playing, like, oh, who is she playing it for? I don't know why you would always default to the most negative possible assumption of the assumption that you could default to. And you could instead say, yeah, maybe she's so hyper excited. Maybe it's been such a long time since she's engaged with a baby, since she's held a baby, that she's really forgotten what it's like, and it feels so special. Maybe she never got to have as many kids as she wanted to when she was in her childbearing years, and now that she has this opportunity to kind of experience a little bit of that maternal feeling that she had way back when she had her own kids, is amazing to her. It's really like making her super, super excited. And I get it if people are behaving in ways that are actually harmful to you or to your child, if they're doing things that are interfering with the boundaries that you're trying to set, with the type of relationship that you want to have with your kids, if they're trying to parent them and you feel that it's not their place to do that. I understand all of this, but otherwise, like, just none of this comes through here. So it just feels evil to me. It feels super selfish. And the idea that she's like, hey, my mom doesn't act overly in love. Like, different people express love in different ways. And I don't see what's malicious about what the mother-in-law is doing here. Now you'll see the comments. The first person does actually agree with me, which gives me a little bit of hope. She says, I think different people show love in different ways. Your mother-in-law might just have a different love language to you and your mother. It might be over the top to you, but as long as she's not trying to compare her love to you or your mother, then I wouldn't see the problem. Exactly. It's fine enough to say people just express themselves in different ways, right? And this person says, my grandmas are like this to me, though not so bad. They act like doting grandmas, but it's all BS. I know who they are. Anyway, some people are just obnoxious, but mean well. Some are fake and do it for show. Is she normally so dramatic? She could be annoying, but sincere. There's so much in this comment that we obviously don't know. So for example, what does they act like doting grandmas, but I know who they are? Like, what does that mean? Presumably there's some source of conflict there. They behave in a particular way, but they actually maybe when she's not around, they behave in a different way or they say other things. This idea of people being two-faced or people being hypocrites and you can't trust them, fair enough, that kind of comes through here a little bit, and I would understand being annoyed then, but at least she still opens, or she leaves the door open that there might be a different interpretation in this case. And then OP replies, she says she's overly wordy when showing love. She sometimes texts my son with my husband, with texts that are so corny and overly mushy that he rolls his eyes and can't even bring himself to respond. So I do think it is her personality to be extra and dramatic in showing her love. I just don't buy that she's already in love with my son. She acted like she was in love before she met him, actually. I guess I just hate the way that she expresses it. It's overwhelming and takes over the whole room, the entire conversation. We would try to talk about something else like TV or sports, and she would interrupt us to say stuff like, oh my God, you guys come here, look at his hands. Like, just calm down. Honestly, I think OP is really in the wrong here. I think she has completely the wrong attitude towards this. There is a certain, I get being annoyed because you want, maybe you want to distance yourself a little bit from the baby. Maybe you're spending a lot of time with the baby. Maybe you are just different personality-wise and you just don't express yourself in this way. But I think this idea of just being annoyed by things like, oh, look at his hands because his hands are really small and his fingers are really tiny and it's really cute. This is not abnormal behavior for people to have around babies. Like, I don't think this is so dramatic or over the top. When you see little feet and you're like, oh my God, look at his little toes. Like, people do this all the time. It's pretty normal. It's pretty standard, even when they're not related to them. Of course, she loves the child before he's born. That's what a healthy grandparent, in similar way that a healthy parent would love their child before they're born. The majority of them do anyway. And even some people say, I didn't feel that connection until after they were born. I got to hold them. Others will even say, I didn't feel that connection until, months down the line, because I was looking after them so much and I could see them start reacting and responding and developing a relationship, developing a personality. And then when I started developing a relationship with them is when I started feeling that connection. But a lot of people do just feel that connection the moment they get pregnant. They know that there's something there. And a lot of people also, the moment that a pregnancy is announced, they understand that there is a connection between them just through biology, right? That's just how that happens, and that's not so strange. So I don't think that anything that the mother-in-law does here is really that bad. You'll see some person picks up on this point. She says, she acted like she was in love before she met him. Actually, don't mothers and fathers do this too? Granted, a child is an extension of the mother and father, but it's also an extension of the grandparents too. And I think that this is pretty normal. You'll see the first person replies to us saying, no, I for sure didn't, and neither did my husband. None of my friends who have had babies have acted hysterical like some of the grandmas that I've seen. Now, when you throw around words like hysterical, then I have a very different image in my head than a grandma that's just excited to hold the baby and who says that his hands are cute and adorable. That's not my image of what hysterical means from a grandparent in terms of behavior. And then you'll see this person, just complete projection here. She says they absolutely don't. The in-laws love her when she's delivered to them and forced to sit on their laps and they get their pictures. We don't force our baby to do that. When this doesn't happen and they're asked to come to us, they got all kinds of excuses and don't come. Suddenly they're too busy, even though they're retired and have time to drive to another country for cheaper alcohol. They've been to our new place only twice in a year. At our old place, they came to visit only a handful of times in several years, even though they lived 10 minutes away. They also never do anything with her that she would like. My mother-in-law only wants kids to sit on her lap and she'll play with them like they're dolls. They act all obsessed on social media though, and when they're trying to control us through guilt, obsession isn't the same as love at all. I agree with this, and I definitely agree that sometimes people get so excited about kids that they're not really considerate about it. So for example, one of the early moments that happened with our baby was when he started being a little bit more alert and a little bit more awake and engaging a little bit more with people. Then often when my in-laws would come, we'd kind of do this thing where he'd sit in the middle of the sofa and he would be surrounded by people all staring at him and trying to get him to do stuff and shoving toys in his face and so on. And obviously it's very overwhelming and very overstimulating. And as an external person, if you just take a little step back and you're like, even if this was an adult, we would not engage with them this way. But obviously people forget themselves a little bit in their excitement when it comes to babies. And it does annoy me just a little bit from this perspective of a little bit of consideration. Just pay attention to their body language, see how they're reacting, see how they're responding. If they find things too loud, if they stop engaging with you, if they don't want to play with you, there are all these cues that babies have where they're like, I'm done. I'm tired now. And often grandparents, for example, will miss these cues. Now, maybe they miss them because they just don't spend enough time with the kids, so they just don't have the opportunity to learn those. But sometimes they do miss them, and they feel very obvious to me, for example, from as the mother. But mostly people miss them just because they miss it. It's not malicious, and it is like, this is where your role as a parent comes in. As a parent, you can step in and say, hey, you know what? He's tired now, we're going to go put him to bed, or we're going to go take a break, or we're going to go do something else. And you can just step in and do it. You're just behaving as a parent by watching out for their needs and trying to structure things, trying to structure the visit in a way that works for you and for your child. And so, for example, in these circumstances, if the mother-in-law only wants kids to sit on her lap and to play with them like dolls, like maybe she really just does not know or understand that there are different ways that you could play with a child, with a grandchild. And maybe you can give her toys that she could play with them with. Maybe you could give her activities that she could do with them. You can try and give her suggestions and try and help her out and give her different opportunities instead of just sitting there and being angry and being like, yeah, she's just not doing it the way that I want her to do it. And that's a very different way of treating people. It's a very different way of interacting with them. Instead of pretending like it's all just pure selfishness and there's absolutely no wish or desire from their end to change how they interact with the baby to suit the baby and their needs, you could assume that they simply just don't know any better, you know? This one is also very interesting. She says, absolutely not. Loving someone means wanting the best for them, not to fulfill our selfish wants like most mother-in-laws on this forum do. And here someone replies to this. She says, this is my mother-in-law. When my 2-month-old cried while she held him, she didn't care about any of his needs or even attempt to comfort him. It was immediately about her. He didn't know her. He didn't like her. Did he cry like this for her mom, the person commenting? She says, I think my mother-in-law is in love with the fantasy that she created in her head about being a grandma and the attention that she'd get from that title, but she doesn't actually care about my son or what he likes, prefers, etc. I don't doubt that there are some mothers-in-law who are actually like this. I'm very sure that there are some people who are that selfish, but honestly, I suspect that for the majority of people, they just don't know how to express themselves any better. And there is this assumption that if you were to really sit down and talk to them about it and be like, hey, why didn't you try to comfort him? Why didn't you bring him to me? Then she, you know, it might be that in that situation, she was just stressed out. She had a stress response because the baby was crying. And she was like, well, is it me? Do they not know me? What am I doing that's wrong? And that it reflected on her not being able to handle him. And that made her really uncomfortable and really sad and really depressed and so on and so forth, right? There are lots of different scenarios, lots of different potential responses that people can have. So yes, it is possible that there are people who just genuinely don't care. But I think for a lot of people, they can't really separate this feeling of care from how it reflects on them as a person. And maybe if you teach them that, if you find a way to talk to them about it, or if you find a way to channel their behavior in ways that work for you, then you can have a totally different idea of it. And so honestly, I just found this one a pretty sad premise from the very beginning. This idea that grandparents who are very excited about their grandkids and who maybe have a bad way of showing it, maybe they can't control their behavior the way that they should. Maybe they're not quite so self-aware or self-reflective as they could be. But assuming that that means a lack of love is very sad to me. I find that not the best possible assumption that you could make and not conducive to having a really good long-term healthy relationship with the grandparents involved in your life as well. Our next one is titled, Am I Ungrateful? My husband and I have been together for 7 years. He's a lovely man. He respects me and supports my dream. He buys me stuff for my home-run business, even without me saying. He anticipates things like that and does it for me. And I love how thoughtful he is. But sometimes I wish he could be spontaneous like how he used to be while dating. We would take trips every month and he used to make efforts into meeting me. He's a businessman now. And while we were dating, he didn't have set office and stuff like that. He goes to work at 12 p.m. and comes back around 11 or 12 a.m., so midnight. I just feel like he could make some effort into taking us out and spending time with our daughter, like buying things and all. Is that just it though? He does a lot for us about this making effort, but this making effort is kind of lacking. Like today, I'm so pissed at him. A week ago, he told me about his relative's wedding that we have to go to. I'm an introvert and don't like going out and meeting people. I don't know. But yesterday I thought, what the hell? It's fine. I'll go and take my daughter to. I was telling him last night that I'd wear this and I could dress our baby up and stuff like that. And then today morning, he comes up to me and says, apparently only he and his parents got invited and how the wedding is very intimate and all. I got so pissed. He's like, I can stay back if you want. I'm like, no, it's okay. You can go. It's Sunday today, and I just wish that he would stay with us, and maybe we could go out and have fun. Most Sundays he has work or some stupid wedding or other crap like that, and I just hate Sundays because of this. Don't I have a right to be mad? I didn't say anything then because I didn't want to spoil his mood. Am I being rude? My knee-jerk response to this is yes, she's being a little bit ungrateful. I'm one of those people who reacts very badly when plans change suddenly. So in this scenario, it's like in this situation, if we had a wedding that was planned and I started making plans to go to it, and then I found out that I'm not going pretty much on the day off, then I would also be angry. But I would be angry just because I am fundamentally terrible at dealing with changes in plans that are unexpected like that. I don't like it. And that's a character flaw that I have. I honestly sounds a little bit like that might be the case here, because she says, I'm an introvert, and she didn't want to go, and then she changed her mind, and then she was like, okay, fine, I'm gonna go, and she started making all these plans and getting excited about what to dress the kid up in, and then it didn't work out. Fine. I think that there's some little bit of element of that. The rest of it, though, it sounds like he's working 12-hour days. It sounds like he is a very supportive husband. It sounds like he does care, and like he gave her the option of him staying home as well. And it doesn't sound like he was bitchy about it, or that he was angry or resentful about it. He was really like, I can stay home and we can spend time together instead. And she is the one who's like, no, you can go. But then she's kind of still holding a grudge about it, and she's still annoyed by it, and she can't get over it now because she told him that he can go. And so she has to sit at home and be by herself and like stew in that resentment that she created by herself. So I think fundamentally, yes, it's totally fine to have expectations when it comes to, when you get married to someone, you don't want to never see them, right? So it's totally fine to have an expectation that you will be spending time with your husband on a regular basis. And it's also totally fine to say, Sundays are sacred for us. They are our time as a family. We won't be doing anything else. We won't be going to weddings, we won't be spending time with other family members, whatever it is. You can do that. You can have that conversation and decide to do that if you want, if you get such little time throughout the rest of the week that this is important to you. All of this is completely fine. But then it's not fair in the moment to be like, you can go and then still be annoyed at him for it. I don't think that that's right. And I think everything else where she's like, I wish he could be spontaneous like how he used to be while we were dating. I understand the urge and I understand the need, and maybe I would even vocalize it to him and be like, I really miss those days. We used to have a lot less to worry about. We used to spend a lot more time together. You used to be a lot more spontaneous and take me out suddenly without us planning it, and it was really awesome and I really enjoyed it. You could say all of that, fine. But you know what you could also do? You could spontaneously plan something and surprise him with it, and then you could go out and have a great time. It does not always have to be this sense of frustration that because he's busy and because he doesn't have time to have this spontaneity that he used to have, then you don't need to give up on that, or to say that, okay, now like he doesn't care about me the way that he used to care about me. I don't think that this is fair at all. I actually think that most men, when they work hard like this, they work hard like this specifically for their family and because they want to provide. And maybe that goes too far. Maybe for the wife at some point, she's like, this is not working for me anymore. I feel like I'm by myself all the time, and that's not a marriage. That's fine. But then that's what you say, and then you sit down together and you talk about it and you try to find a different way. But you don't need to hold a grudge about these kinds of things. So the first comment here says, it seems like once he got his office, he became very busy. You said he's a businessman and works 12 p.m. to 12 a.m. That's a lot of working during the week. And he also has busy weekends. I don't think he doesn't mean to not make time for you and baby. Try asking him about planning a trip for you guys instead of expecting him to be spontaneous. Sometimes you do have to speak up. I believe this is an easy fix with a simple conversation. I hope it works out. And then OP replies, this is something that always comes up, that always comes up, you see. Why is it that I always have to tell him? Shouldn't it be something innate? And there is where I would say there's fundamentally a completely just false assumption and a very, very selfish way of dealing with this situation. Instead of saying, I should tell him I'm not happy about how things are working out, and I should appreciate that, I can say I really appreciate how hard you're working and I understand why you're working so hard, but this is just not tenable for me as a long-term situation. People always think of their relationships in terms of take. So like, this person isn't doing this, they're not giving me that, why aren't they supporting me when it comes to this? It's all the ways that you can take from the other person. And I get that. I understand that in some ways that's a natural urge and a natural thing to want. But maybe you should also think, what am I giving and how do I give? And I think that if she changed that mindset, it's like, why isn't it innate that he thinks about these situations in the exact same way that I do? Why can't he, while he's working 12 hours a day, sit there and put himself in my shoes and imagine how I must be feeling, even though I haven't said anything about it, and then change what he's doing? Because that's a very high expectation. And if he's working this hard, who has time to think about that? Can't you think about it from this perspective of what can I do to make his life easier so that we still get lots of time together and we still fix the problems that I want to fix, but that it's not stressful for him and it's not annoying for him and it's not frustrating because he feels like he's unappreciated. Like, what could I do to change this outcome instead? She says also, OP says, I'm pretty sure if I was as busy as he was, he would have a problem, I'm sure. And yeah, fair enough. Maybe this is the case, but maybe he's also like, I'm only working this hard so that you don't have to you don't have to work to the same extent. Maybe he's like, I'm only doing this so that I can afford to give you extra support when it comes to your business so that I can support your dreams and your happiness as well. You know, it's always quid pro quo. In some ways, and that's a pretty awful attitude to have in a marriage. Like, you cannot always expect that both parties give and take to the same extent at all times, and you should not expect him to be super understanding if he's working very hard to change your life circumstances, to change the lifestyle that he can afford for the family, and then you go and do the same thing. But then that's also not a fair comparison to make. The next one is a little bit long, so I'll only read some of it. She says, a lot of times when one person in the relationship is providing in the sense of purchasing everything the house and family members need, it's their way of making up for not being present. You'll see it with generally, but not all, men who own businesses and who work a lot, that they buy their relationships. They miss anniversaries, birthdays, etc., and make up for it with extravagant gifts, or at the lower end of the scale, try to make up for it by making sure financially that the family is stable. And yeah, that may well be the dynamic that OP is experiencing here. That's kind of what I would assume if someone is working 6 days a week, 12 hours a day, then I would guess that there is some element of that you can't really be as present as you want to be. But I think it's also completely fine for her to say, this is not the life that I want for us. Or to sit down and say, we're only going to be doing this for the next 6 months, so we're going to sacrifice for 6 months, a year, 2 years even. But then there's an end date, and we're working towards having that end date because we want to change how we live. And that's fair. Like, that's okay. That's perfectly acceptable. All of OP's replies to these people, honestly, are a little bit childish. One person here says, I would hate if you were my partner. Stop acting like you're dating, you're married with a child and have responsibilities. Expecting spontaneity is unrealistic and more than slightly childish. And OP gets really upset by this. She says, how is expecting the partner to be present childish? How is just taking me and my child out for even a dinner childish? It was rude of you to just assume stuff. And I think that the childish part of it is having this person there who's kind of working themselves to the bone, and then you're sitting there thinking about all of the ways that he should be taking you out, he should be making you feel special, he should be spending time with you and making you a picnic or whatever you image you have in your head in terms of dating. And fair, like, really, I am 100% on her side when it comes to, you should have time for these things. And it does make a big difference in your marriage and your relationship and to your family if you actually invest time in doing things together. So I'm all for that. But you don't need to do it with this expectation of like, I just wish he could be, spontaneous and surprise me. You could just say, hey, I really want us to plan something out. Maybe we can go out for dinner on this day. Is there a particular day that you could take off and then we could spend time together? How can we do that on a regular basis so that we don't forget what it's like to spend time together? You can just be a little bit more of an adult about the whole thing. One person replies to this. She says, miserable people give miserable input. Ignore small minds. Showing up for each other is what makes relationships last. Ask any old couple who's still happy. Life is short. While financial security is important, so is making time for each other. Either he takes a couple of hours away from his work schedule for you and the family, or he frees up his Sundays. I hope the best for you all and hope that there can be an effort compromise made. And that's a pretty good comment on the whole. Really kind of summarizes how I feel about this. But I think the accusation that the person who thinks it's a little bit childish to expect spontaneity when someone's working 12 hours a day is not necessarily a miserable person, but someone who just has a different perspective. And then the final comment here, she says, if he's working until midnight, how is he supposed to take you out for dinner? You have all day to yourself. What's keeping you from having me time? And don't use, but I have a baby as an excuse. Like most gyms have childcare. You don't have to exercise. You can go to a pool, steam room, get coffee and just chill or get your nails done. I would do it all the time as a single mom. Pick somewhere you want to go on a weekend and set it up so all he has to do is get dressed. And I think that that is maybe kind of taking the wrong point away from this. Fair enough if you want to spend time with your husband. I really believe that. And I really do believe that you have to invest time together to really have a secure and stable and happy marriage that lasts for a long time. But yes, you can do some work for it as well. If he's working all the time to make life easy and comfortable for you, then you can do the same. The next one is titled "Husband Won't Spend Time with My Family." Does anyone else have experience with this? My husband doesn't like my parents. He won't spend time at their house, even though I go there with our son almost every day. I have 4 younger siblings under the age of 18 who live with them, and I enjoy spending time with everyone. It makes me sad that they know he doesn't like going over there and doesn't care about interacting with them, and it hurts my feelings for me and for them. I'm disappointed that my husband won't willingly go with me or have dinner all together once in a while. We never see his family. His parents live in Florida and his brothers don't spend time with us. I feel like my family are the only relatives our son will actually grow up with. And yet my husband will very rarely experience that with us. Family is important to me. I want our baby to be surrounded by people who love him. I wish he had family on my husband's side to see and spend time with. I wish my husband would be more willing to deal with my parents so I wouldn't always feel disappointed by his intentional absence. There are 2 ways you could look at this story. One way is it's rude and cruel and unfair from the husband that he's not interested in spending time with her family. And of course, there's a certain obligation that when you marry into a family, you also invest time there. The other one is her expectations are kind of insane. And I'm pretty sure the truth lies somewhere in the middle. So she says on the one hand that he doesn't want to have dinner all together once in a while. Okay, fine. I can see being annoyed by that and saying it's not a big deal. It's not a big imposition to go over there and spend time maybe every other week or once a week, even if you want to be really regular, or once a month, like at whatever regularity works. But then on the other hand, she says she goes to her parents' house with her siblings and her son, where her siblings live, with her son almost every day. Now, imagine for a second that this was the other way around, and it was the husband who wants to take his son and go to his parents and his siblings every day. I am pretty sure 100% of people would say this is completely over the top and way too regular. And if the wife then did not feel like always going to her in-laws, then everyone would be like, yeah, okay, fine, fair enough. You should tell him that you should get to spend time as a family too. Like that you are not still within that family. You're creating your own family, and that nuclear family needs time as well. I'm pretty sure that's how most people would react. But somehow, because it's on her side and she's attached to her family and she wants to spend all the time there, then suddenly she treats it very differently. And I don't think that's right. In general, I agree with most of what she says in terms of it's nice for the son to have other people around that he's growing up with. It's nice for her to feel like she's supported. There's not a problem with that. But I do think that the expectation that the husband will somehow is that the husband not being comfortable with being over at her parents' place every day is unreasonable. I think that's a bit much. Now, obviously, I don't know what types of conversations they've had about this. If it were my husband, I would compromise with him in terms of how regularly we go over, and we would decide, okay, this is how often is reasonable. We'll have dinner with them once a month or once every other week. Those are the time spans that seem reasonable to me, and that would be it. And then I think we would all move on. And I'm pretty sure he would be enough of a grown-up adult person to be like, yeah, sure, I don't mind being around them, unless there's a different problem. And so we'll get to the comments to find that out. The first one here that I'll read out, she says, while my family is important, your husband is your family now as well. Maybe he just doesn't care to be with them, or maybe even a little jealous that you choose to be with them all the time. Are your parents overbearing? It could be too much for him, especially with 4 other children there. What are his reasons for not going over there? And OP replies, I'm on maternity leave and visit them while he's at work, so jealousy isn't an issue. And the kids are 17, 16, 15, and 10. He doesn't agree with my parents' parenting practices for my siblings. They've moved around a lot, and it hasn't always seemed to be in the kids' best interests. My mom can also be argumentative just for the sake of being so I understand why he doesn't want to engage in conversation. But he's resorted to extremely low contact with all of them, and it hurts me. Now, there's already hints there. Now, you have the overbearing mother-in-law just on the other end. So it's the husband's mother-in-law who seems to be overbearing, who's argumentative. And it seems to be that it got so bad that he's like, I don't want to talk to I don't want to talk to her. And I don't know what kind of level of disagreement he needs to have with the parenting, with their parenting, for him to care about it to this extent. But it sounds like that must be a pretty fundamental disagreement. And so instead of, like, my issue with this, from my perspective, is it seems to me like his wife is just not supportive at all. All she thinks about is that she's comfortable with her parents. And so why can't he just also be comfortable with her parents? But clearly her parents are treating him in a way that he's not happy with. And instead of her being on his side and, for example, talking to her mum about it, saying, or stepping in, stopping the argumentation, whatever that might be like, instead of doing any of that, she's like, yeah, it just makes me sad. That seems not good. We're going to read a couple of other comments from OP here. So this person comments, you're on maternity leave, so you must have a fresh young baby. I disagree with the others and don't see an issue with visiting family while he's at work. Being a new mom is lonely and hard, and family and support is important. How long have you guys been married? Has he always been like this? And then she says, my boyfriend occasionally makes remarks about my family. Recently he didn't, before the baby, oddly enough, which makes it hard because it's making me not even want to invite him to family gatherings, as I know it will just end in him saying mean things and arguing. I'm still at home with my baby and have no issues going over for visits without him. His family is nearby, so we generally visit them together, and I do visits with my family while he's busy. Sorry, I don't have much advice, just solidarity and know how you feel. And that also sounds to me like there is a lot of conflict happening between the boyfriend and the family, and she's not on his side. And the moment that you in a married couple are not on each other's side, that you actually take the sides of the extended families, so the grandparents on either side, then you're like, that's deep water. That is not going to go well. That's definitely going to create problems. And you should really rethink how you're approaching that and how you're engaging with your husband or your boyfriend or your partner versus your parents. OP replies here, she says, my son is 7 weeks old and my family lives a mile away, so I walk over there with the baby during the day and we leave when we're ready or when my husband gets off work. We've only been married since February and together for a year, so I get that he's not used to my family, especially with how many people there are, but he hasn't been making an effort to become more comfortable either. Like you, I also don't invite him to family functions because I don't care for the negativity and it makes me feel bad that I have to even ask in the first place. In my opinion, he should be there by my side without sticking his nose up about it. I'm not asking him to be present as often as I am by any means, but he won't even go there once in a while. Very disappointing. Now, seems, there's, like I said, there's that side where people are like, it's totally unreasonable that he doesn't want to have a cordial relationship. But then here, OP starts digging in a little bit. She starts talking about what some of the problems that he's having are. And so she says, I understand that my husband would much rather be in the comfort of our own home than in my parents', where he's not able to relax. What it really comes down to is my mom asking irritating questions along the lines of, what are you doing to prepare for the future? And making statements like what you should do and what you ought to do. And she has a hard time making conversations that don't revolve around making a point, and it can get very aggravating. I'm used to her and she still pushes my buttons, but he's just decided that he wants nothing to do with it. I think he could try to get used to it though. And there you are. There you are. Now, if my husband said that to me about my parents, I would have a serious conversation with my mom and say, look, this is not working out for us. You need to step back. This is too much. It's too annoying. We're grown adult people. We can make our own decisions. You're not parenting us at this point at all. And it's going to be a real problem if this continues. She's like, I think he could just try to get used to it. I'm honestly blown away by this. If I were her husband, I would also refuse to go over there if I felt like she's not on my side at all and she's not even willing to try and have a conversation and to deal with it. And she doesn't even see that as a reasonable response, then I would also be extremely angry. I'm really sad. Actually, I do think that there are some people in the thread who pick up on this and who make it clear that she's just not behaving as a wife should, in my opinion, because she's not on his side at all. She's not supporting him at all. She doesn't seem to have any understanding for his perspective. She's just kind of like, yeah, but I've grown up with my mom like this the whole time and I still get annoyed by it, but I get over it and then I go there. And he's like, yeah, but I'm annoyed by it and I don't need to get over it and go over there. And that's fair enough. I think he's just setting a boundary that works for him. And she, as the wife, should be trying to extend that boundary as well. That she should make it very clear to her parents. And I'm very sure that he would change his mind in terms of how often he would go over and whether he'd be willing to hang out and have dinner every once in a while if he did not have this problem with the mother-in-law. So in my opinion, this is a mother-in-law husband problem, and the wife is not helping at all. She's completely on the wrong side here. Now, this one is on a totally different note. It's titled Mums with Newborns Going to Daycare. She says, hey, all mums have put their newborns into daycare. Did they get sick more often? Are you happy that you put them into daycare? How did you handle the adjustment after maternity leave? Did you love it? Did you regret putting them in so young? My maternity leave ends mid-February and I'm having a lot of anxiety thinking about my newborn going to daycare. He will be around 11 weeks at the start date. I'm very, very nervous for him to go, considering all the germs, bugs that are going around, RSV, etc. I'm weighing options between daycare or hiring a nanny until he's a little older and then transitioning him to daycare. Now, I'm not going to go into the whole daycare discussion all that much because I think this is a personal choice and a personal decision, and people make that decision for themselves as they need to. I'm not going to knock that. What I find especially sad is, number one, needing to go back to work at 11 weeks or 11 weeks after giving birth. And so having to put your child in daycare then. This is not... Okay, no, I guess it's pretty common depending on where you live. But one of the great things about being in Europe is that this is not super common here. Quite a lot of people are able to take a much, much longer time off work than this. And I just find it so heartbreaking and so sad that we have lived, like we've managed to make it so that mothers have to go to work. And she says she's thinking about daycare, between daycare and hiring a nanny. So it's possible that she's going to go to work and then hire a nanny to look after her child and then pay the nanny with the money that she gets from going to work because she can't afford to stay and look after her own child herself. And that just seems so heartbreaking and so sad and just so frustrating to me. I would not, like I personally would not make the choice to put my child in daycare at 11 weeks old. Like that's just way too young for me. And even with hiring a nanny, I would maybe hire a nanny or like a babysitter or whatever for temporary periods of time for like a couple of hours here and there. So I get little mini breaks throughout the time. If I had no family around and I had no one else who could help me and I had zero support, then that's what I would do. I would always choose to go with family first. But to go back to work and then to leave him there for a full work day would just, that would be tough for me. And so I find this really, just the premise of this thread from the very beginning is really rough and really unfortunate. And there are obviously a lot of people who argue completely against daycare, but you'll see that most people kind of manage to make it work. This person says, unfortunately, they will get sick, but this is part of the process of building their immune system. It's not uncommon for them to be sick multiple times a month. We started at 4 months in January and he was sick every other week until April. Once April came around, we had longer stretches, up to 6 weeks sick-free. We debated going the nanny route, but everyone told us that we're just delaying the inevitable. Also, keeping them isolated just makes things worse, which is why we saw a huge surge in RSV this year. That just makes me so uncomfortable. Like, I think that, yeah, okay, you can say that the more exposure they get to other kids, of course they will get sick. But if they're getting sick so often, then that's generally, I would assume, because they're not actually getting enough recovery time. So at the tail end of a sickness, your immune system is actually quite weak. You're still quite tired. You've expended a lot of energy fighting off the sickness, and you're vulnerable. And then you're immediately in that moment then exposed to the next thing. So of course it immediately makes you sick. Like we're all exposed to a million different viruses on a regular basis all the time. And we don't get sick because our immune system is strong. And a baby not only has a tiny, tiny immune system that's not that strong, but also when they're sick, it's much weaker. And so they get sick more often. So if I had this situation where my kid is sick every couple of weeks from daycare, then I would actually try and take them out for a while, for like a month, and give them a little bit of recovery time. Now, obviously, I'm saying this is someone who's privileged and who gets to stay at home and hang out with my child. But man, that's really rough. I could not do it. She also says, I was like you and dreaded the day and of course cried, but seeing how he does, how his teachers care for him, how much he loves his teachers, I was put more at ease. They also send multiple updates and photos a day via an app, so it made it easier. I don't regret putting him in so young because it was the best thing that we could do. My husband and I have high demand jobs and no family that we can count on for full-time care. That's very sad. She also actually touches on the food and what they feed him. She says, the only thing I cannot stand is their meals. Like most schools, they feed more processed foods than I care for, and there's little I can do about that. But he's not nearly as sick as often a year later, maybe once every couple of months or every few months. It's tough in the beginning in many ways, but it's all temporary. I just, everything from having to live with whatever they feed him, because I think a lot of your immune system actually starts in the gut, and the food that we eat has a huge impact and a huge influence on your gut. And so not being able to change what food he's given when he's like a year old completely boggles my mind. Like that makes me deeply uncomfortable. And then the fact that you need to get multiple updates and photos via an app to feel okay with, to feel like you're involved in your kid's life and you can still see him grow and you can still see him develop, and that you're not anxious about how he's doing throughout the day. Just, it seems to me that it's very clear that it feels unnatural, it feels uncomfortable, it makes you anxious, probably for some kind of reason. It goes against your maternal instincts. And again, I'm really not judging. I completely understand why people make this decision. And, I can see why when you're in the circumstances, you have no other choice. You have no other option. And so you go for it, but it's so sad. And I truly wish that we did not live in a time where this was the way that a lot of people had to parent their children. The next one here says, having worked as a baby teacher at a daycare, I would definitely get a personal nanny. RSV, croup, lice, pink eye, runny nose, and nasty coughs. Something was always around on the daily. But if you do, I would get cameras to watch over the baby and the nanny. I have trust issues. And then another person, and she actually adds a bit more context. She says they can have 18 months old in the same room if there aren't any other younger babies, and they like to mess with the smaller babies, in my experience, like rock the bouncer that the baby sits in or throw toys at the baby. And teachers are always changing diapers and can't be watching 24/7, sadly. So this person does not give the most convincing case for why you should send your baby to daycare. I would also have trust issues with a nanny, to be honest. Like, this is really fundamentally why it's so sad and so unfortunate that people don't have a good support network and extended family around them. Like, I have, for example, like my mom had 8 siblings in total. They were 9, and my dad was one of 4 kids. So if you can imagine, if we were all to have stayed within the same vicinity, the amount of people that you have to engage with, the amount of people who you could in some way trust to look after your kid, hopefully, if you don't have any creepy uncles, that you could trust to look after your kids, was huge, and you would always have support. And in today's world, this is not the case for the vast majority of people, which is really, really sad. This person says, sadly, my maternity leave ended at 6 weeks. Oh my God, 6 weeks. She got sick within a week and it was pretty bad. She's now almost 12 weeks and we're on cold number 2. It's not as bad as the first. I'm still going through postpartum anxiety and postpartum depression. In a way, daycare has helped tremendously with postpartum depression. I feel like I'm getting a little bit of myself back. I can drink coffee and eat uninterrupted. I can shower, nap, or work out on my lunch break. However, my postpartum anxiety is through the roof. I'm constantly worrying about her. They don't do the things the way that I do. It makes me sad that they don't hold her for her naps. I find myself constantly missing her. So as soon as I'm done with work, I hurry up and get her. It's a transition, and in my case, I'm still working on my emotions on how to handle it. Utterly heartbreaking and really depressing and really sad. I think when women fixate on it like this, then it means that they feel like they are not as present for their kids as they want to be. And I cannot imagine after 6 weeks leaving my child for a full work day. Like that would mess me up pretty intensely. So not knocking daycare. I understand that some people are forced to use it and are in situations where they have to. I also understand actually that some people may actively choose to do it because they want a few hours to themselves here and there, or they want a day off, or whatever it might be. But I think that for a lot of people, they only do it because they have no other option. And that is what makes it really insidious, and what gives me the impression that we do not live in a society that's really set up to support women, to support families, to make it easy for people to parent, and is actually putting quite a lot of stress on them instead. Our next one is titled Thoughts on Having a Baby Before Marriage. Just a quick little question, because I'm 8 weeks and 2 days and not married. My family is big on traditional things like getting married, then have kids, etc. But I'm wondering if anyone has any tips getting my head out of feeling guilty for not doing it that way. My relationship is by no means traditional. I'm young and just now getting settled in my career, killing it at my job, and have all of the foundations to raise a baby in a good household with my boyfriend. Guess I just fear judgment from family and peers, especially work people, when it comes to telling them I'm pregnant, anybody in the same boat. Of course, I want to be excited about this chapter in my life, but can't help but get a bit worried about what others will think. Now, I actually think that if she feels a little bit bad and a little bit awkward about it, then that is probably because she feels like there is a lack of something, and she just doesn't have the words to describe what that thing is. I spent a very long period of time, you'll see that there's a lot of people here that also say this, thinking that, you know what, marriage is not really that important. Ultimately, I've been with my husband now for 11 years, and we only got married 6 years into our marriage, 6 years into our relationship. So we've only been married for 5 years out of the 11. And for those first 6 years, both of us pretty much were like, yeah, you know what? We know that we're in this together. We know that we are committed to each other. We know that we're going to be together for a good long time. And both of us are planning on being here. You know, we're here for the long haul. And neither of us really understood what the idea of getting married would offer us additionally. Eventually, when we got married, obviously we did all the, tax benefits, blah, 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 all of those aspects to it. But beyond all of that, because I think that in some ways you kind of convince yourself that that's all you get out of marriage, I do think that there is a fundamental difference in how you approach your relationship and in how society views your relationship. And so I think marriage still carries a lot of weight and a lot of meaning for people in the societal sense. There is definitely a difference when you stand in front of each other and you stand in front of the people that you know, the people that are important to you. And you make a commitment vocally and verbally and consciously to each other, where you actively say, yes, we are in this for good now. And I think that is like that ritual, the ceremony of it does change a little bit how you feel about your relationship and how you feel about each other. So I think that for the majority of people, where possible, getting married is actually a good first step before having a baby. Obviously, it doesn't happen. And the fact that it doesn't happen always, and the fact that it didn't happen in your particular case doesn't necessarily mean that you are not going to have a good, stable, secure household to raise your child in. You might still be able to do that, but I would probably say if you can get married, it's definitely worth thinking about. And I think it makes a difference for people. Now, I know that there's a lot of people out there who go on about all the negatives of marriage and how harmful it is for men and all of that. Beyond all of that, and not taking that into consideration, maybe we can do a deeper dive into marriage at some other point. I think it is better to try and have a baby after you are married. And that is not just from the perspective of traditionalism. It's not just from this idea of, are we all still in the 1950s and the idea of having a bastard and so on. And without any of that, I think that your relationship changes, the dynamic of your relationship changes just a little bit when you are actually married to each other. And I think you feel the weight of that in a way that is different to when you are not married. Personally, anyway. Now, you'll see the comments. I'm pretty much the only person that says this, although, to be fair, OP does ask for tips on getting over this feeling that she's missing something. So maybe that's why everyone comes down so hard on her side. This person says, it's not the 1800s anymore. Families look all sorts of ways these days. If you're in a stable relationship or not, if you've got a job or a house or a part-time side gig in an apartment, it doesn't really matter. There's no shame in having a baby in any fashion you like, as long as you are happy, you both are healthy, and you'll give it the best you can. I'd say you are already killing motherhood. It's hard. Who cares about a government document? I disagree with 150% of what she said here. So I find it hilarious that people jump to the 1800s as the comparison to when marriage was a pretty common thing, But no, yes, it does matter if you're in a stable relationship. It does matter that you have an income, whether it is a traditional job or a side gig or whatever, fine. It doesn't matter if you have a house or an apartment, fair enough, but you need some kind of shelter. There are fundamental things that you should be able to provide your child. And actually a secure household, secure shelter with an income, with food, and ideally with both biological parents present, that's what we should be aiming for. And then it doesn't work out in all circumstances. Sometimes kids are adopted, sometimes a relationship breaks apart, sometimes people are abusive. All of these other things that happen, they should be not, like, they are not the norm. We should not accept that because families come in all shapes and sizes, then all families are equally good, all lifestyles are equally as healthy for a baby. It is not. It is, when she says, there is no shame in having a baby in any fashion you like as long as you are happy. There is absolutely a shame in having a baby in any fashion you like, even when you're happy, if it's not good for the baby. Like, actually, the baby's needs here take precedence over the mother and her wishes. As much as you can, you should try to create an environment that's good for raising a baby. And then you can try and make sure that it's an environment that you're happy with. So I'm not saying that you should be miserable as a mother, or you should stick in an abusive household because you want him to still have a relationship with his dad or whatever else is going on. Ultimately, though, your first responsibility should be to your child, and I really believe this very strongly. This person says, my fiance and I didn't get around to getting married before getting pregnant. Life happened and all of a sudden baby, and I didn't want to wear a wedding dress while pregnant. Anyway, no guilt should be felt if you and your boyfriend are happy. You're happy, the baby will be happy. If you're good with your situation, then your family can deal. People rarely do things traditionally anymore anyway. You're not the only one. You just do you. And yes, you can't do anything to change the situation now. Like, you're already in this situation, so you might as well own it and move on. But I think it's fair enough to say, like, was this a good life choice? And yes, you can do everything that you can to still, like I said, have a stable, secure household for your child. And that is paramount. Like, that's the most important thing that you can do. And then whether you're married or not is kind of the cherry on top, right? Like, it's ideal. But if you're not, then so long as the baby is still well looked after and well cared for and has a relationship with both parents, then it's at least you're doing the best that you can. This person says, I'm 32 and 10 weeks pregnant with my boyfriend. I still haven't told my family for the same anxious reasons. Parents are very traditional, so just dreading sitting through their reaction. I felt a lot of shame because I always thought I would do things traditionally, but I'm working on making peace with my situation and trusting it's all divine timing. Only we can decide what is right for us, and it is our job to reclaim the joy in our lives. I get the sentiment. I actually don't disagree with the sentiment at all. I think when you find yourself in a situation that you had not imagined for yourself, there is this aspect, this is an element of grief, I guess. You have to kind of grieve the image that you had, the life that you were working towards, what you wanted to achieve, and then accept where you are now, and then try and move on from there. Because you can't change where you are in the moment. So I think that the general principle here of what she's saying is right. But I do think that having a lot of people say it doesn't matter if you do things a traditional way, it doesn't matter what shape or form your family takes, and there's no value in marriage anyway. I think all of these are kind of harmful, let's say, pieces of advice. Yeah. And this final comment that I'll read now, she says, I try not to worry about things like that. Not all, but some people in my family aren't married and have kids, or weren't married to the person that they have kids with, and we don't treat them badly. I broke up with my boyfriend of 5 years and then got back together, broke up again, and found out that I was pregnant afterwards. And not once has anyone who knows the situation treated me badly. This isn't the 1800s anymore. People are a lot more understanding than they used to be. And yeah, I don't think that people should be treated badly for making terrible decisions, whatever those terrible decisions look like. But this one looks like a pretty terrible decision to me, to be honest. I don't think you need to treat people badly, but I do think that it's completely acceptable and okay and fine to say that this is not ideal. And if you could choose to do things differently, you should choose to do things differently. And that's perfectly fine. So in general, yes, there is more value to being married than the actual piece of paper that you get from it. It is the aspect of making a commitment publicly to your spouse, and it carries a lot of societal weight, and people definitely, not only do you have totally different legal responsibilities and obligations and commitments to each other, but you also have a very different social commitment to each other as well. And so if possible, it's great to have babies within the married, like as a married couple, if you can. If you can't for whatever reason, then that does not, it's not the end of the world. It doesn't mean that your baby has to have a terrible life. It just means that now you can focus on creating a good life for them. That's all we've got time for today. If you enjoyed the episode, feel free to leave a comment, feel free to like the video, and also to subscribe to get future content. I will see you next time.